Greetings, ladies and gentlefish, and welcome to another set of subscriber replays. This time with a decidedly American theme. The American tech tree is pretty popular within the game, and that's for fairly good reason. And it's one of those tech trees that I tend to recommend to people who are starting the game. Because generally speaking, these tanks are relatively well-rounded. They don't usually rely on a single gimmick to be good, and they tend to be pretty punishing if you make a mistake. Now, the two machines we have got in today's video are some of the less subtle in that particular tech tree. We're kicking off proceedings with Puffs again. I know, his name does tend to rear its head from time to time. And he is in the T-29. This is, of course... yeah, you can hear that we've still got a bit of the lurgy. This is, of course, the Tier 7 American heavy tank. Renowned for having a ridiculously strong frontal turret and having a pretty good gun. And in my opinion, this is still, by quite some considerable margin, the best Tier 7 heavy tank in the game. However, to balance all that out, in case you haven't noticed the matchmaking, this is a Tier 9 game. And again, there's actually, you know, typically you'd expect it to be 3-5-7 matchmaking, but there's actually more Tier 9s than that. So this is relatively unfriendly matchmaking for our hero here, Puffs. Now, he is platooned up with the Chieftain, no, not that one, in his T-29 as well. Hello, Mr. T-32, how are you doing today? Oh, that was kinda lucky, because for all this gun's qualities, accurate, it is not, if we're going to be honest. The accuracy does leave something to be desired, although I must admit usually that's not something you notice as being a huge hindrance, because generally speaking, on these American guns, whilst the fully aimed accuracy may not be fantastic, the soft stats and the aiming stats on the gun are not to be sniffed at. So there's that. Now I should note that Puffs and his friend here, the Chieftain, in their T-29s have come down to, well, an area of the map where you should expect to run straight into the enemy's top tier heavy tanks. You know, E75s, M103s and whatnot. And they have. There's an E75 down there. There's also a rather out of position waffle thrower, the Tier 7 premium variant. And Puffs is slinging high explosive at the moment. Now, this isn't actually a completely terrible idea, especially at the time when this game was played. So this game was played prior to any HE changes, I would like to point out. This probably wouldn't be as effective these days because, well, the high explosive mechanics have been changed, and I'm not going to get into a rant about that. So this probably wouldn't be as effective these days, but essentially... ooh, nice shot there from the Chieftain. Essentially 105mm HE here. They can actually do some, you know, not awful chip damage to the E75, as well as damage modules and things like that. And of course, that waffle thrower is just going to have a very bad time if one of those 105mm HE rounds manages to hit him flush in an armor plate, because his armor is made of tissue paper. Wishful thinking. Having said that, in that sort of situation, well, you're glad for the AP, let's be honest. A nice shot there into the side of that M103, and actually in this position, Puffs has the opportunity to go hull down, and the M103 doesn't have fantastic options to deal with Puffs, despite the fact that Puffs is 2 tiers lower than him. The T-29 is one of those weird machines that can not only hold its own, but can bully tanks 2 tiers higher than itself in the right situation. It's a weird machine, and yeah, I think it's almost amazing this thing still hasn't been nerfed after all these years. For anyone who's interested, by the way, this thing used to be terrible because those ears on the side of the turret used to be a hitbox. And they were pretty weak and easy to penetrate, and so you tried to go hull down and people just shot you in the ears and you died. This is going a long way back. Then they removed those ears as being a hitbox, and found out that suddenly the T-29 became really good because it could go hull down and boss tier 9s around. But they just decided to keep that, like, but this is fine, what could go wrong? So I don't know, I don't know, and you might have noticed that I'm kind of rambling on a little bit here, because there isn't that much happening. This is the thing, when you're in your bottom tier matchups, even if you are in a stupidly powerful tank like the T-29 here, you do occasionally have to be, you know, kind of careful. It's also notable here, by the way, that Puffs has switched to his APCR rounds, presumably to deal with that E75. And that's fair enough. The regular AP rounds on this tank get about 200 pen, 198. Ooh, rectal E50, rectal E50. And the APCR rounds put that pen up to 245. Now, the irony, of course, being, ooh, that E50 has the sport gun. The irony, of course, being that Puffs does not need these APCR rounds to deal with that E50, or with that Centurion, you know, or with that Tiger. He needed them for the E75, who he is not currently having to engage. So frankly, at this point, he could switch back to armor-piercing rounds, and I would actually recommend it, and save those APCR rounds for the E75. Because there is obviously the potential here for him to just be unloading into the Centurion and the Tiger and whatnot with these APCR rounds, and then to not have them to deal with the E75, so you do have to be a little bit careful. And now there's an enemy T-29 pushing on Puffs, but again, the APCR isn't needed here, and that T-29 can be left in a rather dicey position. Puffs doing a nice bit of reverse side scraping here, tracking the T-29 in place, allowing his platoon mate to put a shot in, and now suddenly this T-29 has realised he's in a bad spot, and he is done, and he is dead. Ooh, another shot in the side from that M103, who's been a little bit of a thorn. But, well, that enemy assault, it hasn't been entirely unsuccessful, but Puffs has managed to dig in. Now, in positions like this, it can be dodgy because, oh, that was a very low damage roll, 320 average on this gun, but anyway. In situations like this, it can be a little bit dodgy because APCR round in the butt. The T-29 is not small, it is a large chonker, and as a result, it's quite difficult to hide that big fat American booty. Now, at this point, I will be honest, I think, well, most times when I see a replay like this, I wouldn't necessarily show it because there's a lot of unnecessary APCR being used here. And I know I'm a little bit old-fashioned, but I'm still not a huge fan of that. In this particular case, because Puffs is bottom tier, and frankly the APCR has made no difference, I'm less bothered. As in, he could have been firing AP here and it would have done the same. So, if you're watching this and thinking, I need APCR to make this tank work or something, you don't. You could be achieving exactly this result with good old-fashioned armor piercing. Now, it made sense to load it when Puffs thought he was going to have to deal with the E75, and at that point, when you're in the thick of shooting peeps, it's entirely understandable why loading a cheaper round that is also slightly inferior wouldn't be at the top of your list of things to do. So I don't mean that to be a massive dig at Puffs or anything. I just want to highlight that if you're looking at this and wondering if you need APCR to make the T-29 work, the answer is no. I carry 5 rounds of APCR on my T-29 and I don't remember ever firing a single one of them, and I've played, I can't remember exactly how many matches in it, but a fair few. So, yeah, just be aware of that. Anyway, that was the game. It was essentially about that little bit of fisticuffs in the middle there. Bit of a slow burner until the action got going, but when the action got going, it, I thought, was pretty decent. And again, always remember, Puffs there was not top tier. Anyway, let's have a little look at the post-game stats for this one. So there we go. No big medals there, but that was still enough for Ace Tanker, Spotter, Bruiser, Fighter, there, Duelist, and Fire for Effect. Still a really nice result there. 3,678 damage done, 4 kills, 1,687 base experience. And actually the Chieftain, Puff's platoon mate there, also had a pretty good game. 2.6k damage and over 1100 base XP in his T-29. So that really was a game where the tier 7s and 8s, if you look at the CS52, were kind of keeping the friendly team in it. Top tier tanks did not have the best run. Commiserations to Roman03 in his E50. 4k damage from him on the enemy team. Still just not enough for the win. C'est la vie. We've all had teams like that. 19 shots fired, 16 hits, 13 pens, a little bit of splash damage there as well. Most of that damage was from pretty close range. 5 hits received, 3 penned, 2 did not. 8 enemy vehicles damaged, 4 destroyed, 2,000 odd assistance damage. And you can see there are some quite substantial ammunition resupply costs there because Puffs fired quite a bit of APCR. But again, just to highlight, you don't need APCR to make that tank work. And a good amount of XP with an event going on. So, there's our first game. Let's move on to our second. So, second game then, and I did mention these were going to be unsubtle. It's difficult to think of a machine less subtle than the T110E3. This is non-turreted, tier 10, American tank destroyer. Now, the design philosophy of this machine, broadly speaking, seems to be, here is a slab of steel. Let's make the slab of steel as thick as we can. Let's poke a dirty great big gun out the front. Dave, haven't you forgot this thing's supposed to be able to move? Oh yeah, I'm not actually designing a fortress. Let's give it an engine and some tracks, I guess. And voila, you have the T110E3. One of the most heavily armoured tanks in the game, at least from the front. And it's being driven today by Sumgrass, who is a very good player. And this is often not the sort of tank you see very good players driving because, well, if you've got a machine that's kind of slow and sluggish, there's a tendency for it to, I guess, skill cap you. It's difficult to outplay people when all you can do is drive towards them. However, Sumgrass here is going to show you the true ways of the American ballet dancer of death. So, he's not going to sit at the back in this thing, which is good, because that's not how you should use this tank. The accuracy isn't amazing. It's an assault tank destroyer. So he's going to go forward and he's going to assault. And his team's going to bite off a bit more than they can chew. But before they do, this is a very unfortunate Object 705. Very unfortunate. Now, you might notice what the enemy team are doing. The enemy team are pushing hard on this flank. We're on Pilsen, by the way, and it's an encounter game, but none of that really matters. There's the second shot, sets the object on fire, who then puts the fire out. Note, that was a manual fire extinguisher because the guy ticked for a couple of bits of nice flamey goodness. Object 257 blows off Sumgrass's tracks, and then Sumgrass is like, "Ah, hi, you're dead." Now there goes kill number 1. Hurrah, but the enemy are committing hard to this flank, and that puts Sumgrass in a really dicey position because there's only 2 of them here. Sumgrass and this IS-7. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 enemy tanks. This is looking like a problem. And the T110E3 is not a tank well suited to this sort of situation because if it gets surrounded, its sides and its rear are armoured with tissue. It's really a frontal engagement tank. Ooh, another fire. Hurrah. I'd like to point out, by the way, you might go, "Oh, Sumgrass is getting lucky with the fires." And that's kind of true. But he's also getting unlucky with some of these damage rolls, so it kind of balances out. However, surrounded, what is Sumgrass going to do? Well, he's going to push forward, and he's going to kill the tanks that he can. He's going to reduce the numbers against him. And I was expecting him to get shot in the butt here. But it seems the IS-7 is reloading, or maybe he's ammo racked, or maybe he just doesn't fully appreciate the situation, and that Object 430 is bitten off more than he can chew. There we go, that deals with him. And now it's this IS-7. Suddenly starting to wonder, guys, where are you? Well, there's an answer for that. So there's a shot from the IS-7 that penetrates Sumgrass, and there's a shot from Sumgrass that penetrates the IS-7. And Sumgrass has a bigger gun. And now he's not surrounded, he just needs to deal with this IS-7. Now the IS-7, bless his little cotton socks, is desperately trying to get around Sumgrass, and to be fair to him, he's almost succeeding, but well, Sumgrass isn't an idiot. And the IS-7 just drove into a brick wall. So the IS-7 is now a one-shot for Sumgrass, and probably getting a little stressed at this point. Takes out Sumgrass's tracks, Sumgrass puts those tracks back on, and, well, bye. Suddenly, scoreline is 9-3, 10-3, The friendly team has a 7,000 hit point advantage. There's the backside of that AMX from earlier on. And, yeah, things are pretty much done. Foch 155, sorry, Foch B, not the 155. Put a shot into his side. Boo. Oh, no, cheeky. So Sumgrass goes for the tracking shot there, does damage and tracks the Foch. The Foch has a nasty auto-loader and he's loaded the gold. So he's going to be trying to shoot Sumgrass in the lower front plate. Sumgrass closes the distance to close off the angle to his lower front plate and executes the Foch. That just leaves Artie and, well, that's an AMX 13105 and a Leopard 1. Bye. And that's it. Told you that game wouldn't outstay its welcome. Let's have a look at the stats. So there we go. Despite having his back against the wall, metaphorically and in some cases literally, and despite being outnumbered by lots of bad guys, a little bit of the fat high-tier American shuffle, was able to get some grass out of that situation. Still alive. And that's quite a nice medal haul as well. Ace Tanker, Bruiser, Duelist, Fire for Effect, Shellproof, Steel Ball, High Caliber, and a Top Gun, and a Tier 10 to boot. Top of the friendly team with 6,232 damage done, 6 kills, or 1,359 base experience. Delicious XP. 12 shots fired, 12 hits, 12 pens, lots of damage, many hits received, most of them bounced, 4k damage blocked by his armor, 6 enemy vehicles damaged, 6 destroyed. I was just a really solid 4-minute game. It's a bit silly. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed those 2 games. If you did, by all means, feel free to catch some of my other videos and or subscribe to my channel. And as ever, I wish you very happy hunting on that battlefield.